If you want to be a part of the conversation before it happens here on YouTube, click that link in the description to join the free Courtside Financial Discord. What's going on, everyone? My name's Obi, and welcome back to Courtside Financial, the podcast where we talk about business and technology. In today's episode, we're here to talk about the latest trends, innovations, and controversies shaping the world that we live in today. Specifically, when it comes to electric vehicles, it's a tale of two stories. We're talking about the US and we're talking about China. We're talking about the upcoming election. We're thinking about things like, what does whoever ends up in office mean for a company like NIO? Since we are NIO investors, we're thinking about things like the mindset of electric vehicles in China versus the mindset of electric vehicles in the US. We're talking about, do electric vehicles really have mind share amongst consumers over here in the US? So this is going to be a super interesting video, super insightful podcast. If you're new to the channel, make sure you hit the like button, make sure you hit the subscribe button for sure, click the notification bell icon, and leave a comment down below so we can keep covering big, important topics like this, and I do it to spread information. So anyways, without further ado, let's get into today's episode. Today, we're diving into the heart of a topic that's not just a hot debate, but also a key issue in the upcoming election: the future of electric vehicles. Specifically, what does the future of EVs look like in America, and how does it compare to China's rapid ascent within the industry? Before we get into the nitty-gritty, I want to pose a question that's been bouncing around in my head, and I'm sure yours as well, for probably the past several years. What if electric vehicles really are the future? And let's face it, who's best equipped today to lead that charge? Now, for all my NIO investors, this is going to hit home because we're always thinking about who's going to be friendlier to our investments. Who in the political landscape will support innovation, particularly from a company like NIO? And how do we balance supporting American-made EVs while also noting that a country like China is leading in terms of innovation in this space? Stick around because we're covering all of that today. Let's start by being real. America is not leading the race for electric vehicles. Far from it. Sure, you have Tesla that's done incredible things, but overall, we've got to be honest, and the US is playing catch up if we're being honest. I mean, just look at the numbers. In the first quarter of this year, EV sales grew in the US by only 2.6% year over year. This is nothing compared to China, where NIO and other companies are absolutely crushing it. Meanwhile, over here in the US, we're not even on pace to meet one of the goals we had originally set of EVs making up 50% of all new car sales by 2030. The US is currently sitting at an 8% EV penetration rate. But what about China? Well, they're hitting numbers that are making us all stop what we're doing, pause, and reflect. Now, what's holding us back? It's not just that people aren't buying EV, it's the infrastructure, or lack thereof. Charging stations are getting vandalized, copper wire theft is running rampant, and even if you find a station that's not broken, it still might be inoperable. Let me paint the picture for you. Imagine driving your brand new, shiny, sexy EV to a charging station only to find out that someone stole all the cabling the night before. It's happening more and more frequently, and it's a huge obstacle that America, quite frankly, needs to address. You can't convince people to go electric if they don't have reliable places to charge their car. And don't think that this is a problem that's unique to the US. Even in China, there have been reports of charging stations getting hit by thieves. But here's the difference. China isn't letting that hold them back. They're still miles ahead in terms of building a functional, reliable ecosystem of powering solutions. And now another roadblock is this weird, almost reactionary anti-EV environment that we're seeing here in the US. You've seen it. People protesting electric vehicles almost as if they're the enemy. Some call it the green rebound, where others lash out against EVs. Not because they're bad, but simply because they represent change. There's a post circulating that someone spent almost $30 million on an anti-EV PR campaign just to stir up emotions. That's a lot of money to convince people to stay with gas-powered cars. So why is this happening? Well, it's deeply political. You've got oil companies pulling the strings behind the scenes, trying to keep America dependent on gasoline. And that's no conspiracy theory. It's well documented. Oil companies like ExxonMobil, Chevron, and others have lobbied hard to keep America attached to oil. They're trying hard to slow down the adoption of EVs because it threatens their bottom line. But here's the thing, technology always wins. EVs aren't going away. The number of gas stations in the US has been steadily declining since the 90s. At its peak, there were over 200,000 gas stations, while today there's around 130,000 gas stations in the United States. Meanwhile, the number of EV charging stations are on the rise. Electric is in the future, whether big oil likes it or not. So how does this all tie back to NIO and your investment in the company? Well, for starters, NIO's been at the forefront of innovation. Their battery swapping stations, their investment in autonomous driving technology, and their entire ecosystem, including places like NIO houses, are concepts that America or American companies, whatever, however you want to say it, is just now starting to grasp. NIO has been creating a whole lifestyle around their vehicles, something that we don't really see in the US. Can't think of one company that's doing that, honestly, truly. Maybe you could argue that Tesla's doing that in a way, but not to the extent that NIO is. But here's where it gets tricky. US policy is getting tougher on Chinese companies, and of course that includes NIO. Recently, the government proposed banning vehicle networking hardware from China, citing national security concerns. Companies like GM and Ford, which assemble cars in China, are certainly being impacted by this. If these bans go into effect, it can make it harder for companies like NIO to tap into the US market. But here's the catch. This is where iron sharpens iron. Competition between China and the US in the EV space doesn't necessarily have to be a bad thing. Both markets don't have to exist and be mutually exclusive. In their existence, they can coexist. In fact, it could push both companies to innovate faster, which would be a win for people like us, investors. So if you're a NIO investor like I am, with this upcoming election, you should be thinking about which candidate would take a more nuanced stance on China. Who's going to promote healthy competition without completely shutting the door on innovation from overseas? Because let's be honest, China is leading in EV innovation right now, and cutting ties with them entirely is only going to slow down progress. The real question here is, can America catch up in the EV race? And more importantly, how? Well, the answer lies in two things: infrastructure and policy. The Biden administration has been pushing for more investment in EV infrastructure, but that's just the beginning. There's a lot of wood to chop. The US needs to make serious investments in charging station, battery technology, and green energy production to be able to compete on the global stage. At the same time, we need a balanced approach, supporting American-made electric vehicle companies like Tesla or Rivian. That doesn't mean that we have to shun innovation from abroad. In fact, competition from companies like NIO can push American companies to do better and really sharpen their sword. As I said earlier, iron sharpens iron. As voters, we need to think carefully about who we're voting for in this next election. Do you want a candidate that's going to stifle competition and innovation, or one who's going to encourage it? Because make no mistake, whoever wins will have a huge impact on the future of EVs, not just in America, but also globally. As we wrap up this episode, let's take a step back and think about what's at stake. Electric vehicles, they're the future. There's no denying that. But America is lagging behind, and if we don't get serious about innovation and infrastructure, we risk falling even further. At the same time, as NIO investors, we want to see policies that support global competition, because that's how you get the best products as a consumer and you get the best returns as an investor. So what can you do? Stay informed, Stay invested, and when the time comes, vote for policies and leaders that'll help push innovation forward. Remember, supporting American innovation and letting China being aware that China is leading in the EV industry. These things don't have to be mutually exclusive. After all, the goal here is progress for everyone, the entire world. That's all for today's episode. If you found it valuable, insightful, gave you something to think about, make sure you hit the like button, make sure you hit the subscribe button, click the notification bell icon, and leave a comment down below. I'll catch you guys in the next installment. Peace.